You know, big data has this interesting magic to it. It is that you can determine things from poor data that you wouldn't expect, right? Just where you're standing and where you're moving can help figure out how well you're doing. It isn't that you said, my foot hurts, right? It is that you're not getting as fast to the bus stop as you did in the last 3 weeks. There are all kinds of inference data that you get from big data, and this is where innovation plays in.
So this is this question of the fidelity of the data. You can be at a very large level and say, gee, it seems like there's some patterns where these people are moving more than these people. But if you really want to know, when New York City, what % of the patients who have elective bypass surgery at one hospital would say they would do it again 6 months later versus what % say it at another hospital, or what % are feeling less pain? I mean, so you can develop hypotheses, I think, with large data sets, and it all depends on how much confidence you need in your result. Right. I mean, if I can be 2 or 3% more confident than everybody else that some company's going to succeed over time, I'm going to be a really good investor because I only need a couple % advantage over someone to take advantage of that arbitrage. But if I'm trying to make an inference about strategy A versus strategy B, or hospital A versus hospital B, I'm in a whole different ballpark.
The life sciences professional in me can't help but observe that maybe this is one of the answers that actually the pharma panel needs to think about, because they always start small in phase 1, and they get bigger, 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 bigger. But actually some of the pre-competitive stuff that's been talked about is really about exactly what you guys are talking about. These are not mutually exclusive ideas, I think. Using the huge data set to try to intuit what we could be doing differently and then measuring it very specifically and accurately to prove it, but I think could have an important future. Let me just say this, we're going to take questions in a few minutes. I'm just going to ask the panelists one more thing in regards to this. So think about what you might want to ask, and you can start putting your hands up. What is the role of regulators at that table, Andy, that you were talking about? So should the FDA be sitting at this table that's thinking about better measurements of outcomes and costs?
You know, it's interesting you bring up the FDA. I think what the FDA wants is the same thing I think every local physician should want, which is a surveillance system that allows them to know what's going on in as close to real time as possible, in the case of the FDA, with drug safety issues. But as we move closer and closer to a world where the people delivering care are the people that are taking risk, as we're doing with ACOs, people are going to have to understand very fundamental questions like who's in my panel and where are they? And I think that is a course that is probably a more productive course because I think we'll start to build some of the basic blocking and tackling of data needs from there.
What do you think about regulators?
Well, I don't think there's any question about this issue about surveillance. Actually, we're working with the FDA on trying to develop this roadmap with some companies and people. But the biggest thing for me about the regulators, sure, they need to be at the thing, is they need to facilitate also access to data which is meaningful. I mean, this is for drugs and devices, I've been pushing this for a long time. For the privilege of selling a drug or device, I think you have an obligation to ensure that all the information about the risks and benefits of that drug and device are open for others to look at and to make inferences about it. And right now it's not. And the FDA is not allowed to share. The companies must share their data. And they can talk about proprietary interest all you want, but I'm talking about drugs that are being sold and decisions that patients face every day. Their data from unpublished studies or selectively published studies that are behind closed doors that people don't know. And it's only when they get, under unusual circumstances, when that data becomes available, that we recalibrate our expectations about the balance of risks and benefits. And individuals facing decisions are shielded from that. We're going to talk about big data. We need to say, what are those pockets of data which legitimately should be in the public domain so that we can allow many people to work on it?
Who's your EMR vendor?
Ours?
Yeah.
Epic.
And how open are they about sharing data in the community?
Well, this is what I've been railing against. Epic is so, I'll say publicly, one thing that annoys me about Epic is if we develop an innovation around quality at Yale, we cannot share it with others. Epic will own it and sell it. So we have no ability, even if we've developed it, to do those things. We've got to work on that too.
There's an opportunity for a regulator.
Exactly. So let's take some questions from the audience.
Yeah.
Sorry, Peter.
Go ahead.
Hello, Rodney Zemmel from McKinsey & Company. You explored this a bit in the panel, but I'd be interested in getting a little deeper on it. There's an enormous amount of small data in healthcare that is not used, whether it's drug compliance or whether it's a patient's weight. Why is spending more money on bigger data sets going to change behavior?
Small data is big data. I mean, that is the whole point. The problem in regulation in big data is less about FDA and more about HIPAA. I see over here Bill Braithwaite, who wrote HIPAA. If you want to go blame somebody, he's in the corner here. But the fact is, to the extent that we can reduce the barriers of people sharing that small data and getting the information where it needs to go, 30% of the cost of tests are repeated unnecessarily. Talk about waste. Just because the next guy couldn't get access to the last piece of data.
And just quickly, I think that the idea here is not investing in collecting large amounts of new data, but figuring out in the ongoing operation of the healthcare system, how can data be generated so we can be smarter with using it, so at the margin we get return.
Yeah.
Next question.
Marcus Fromhertz from Xerox. I thought your comment was really interesting about how you shouldn't have to choose a doctor the way you don't have to choose a pilot when you go on a flight, but it depends, of course, on whether you're on a commercial flight or in an experimental airplane where I'd rather have a really experienced one. And healthcare is similar. There's a lot of medicine that's moving into more like commercial flights. It's very repeatable. But then there is a lot of, knee surgery, for example, very repeatable kind of medicine, whereas there's a lot of medicine that's more like an art. Can you say something about the use of big data for those two categories? Very repeatable ones where maybe there's a lot of learning that can be propagated through big data, but then also, where it's still very experimental, more of an art, and the use of big data there.
So I think we hide behind a little bit sometimes the art. I think the art has to be in the human interaction and really understand who the patient is, really pulling out preferences, values, and goals, the kind of things to come to decisions that are meaningful. But with regard to medicine, I think 99.9% is in this regular, everyday practice piece for which there's immense variability in practice, which has implications for cost, quality, the actual results that patients are experiencing, that we've got to be able to bring into a transparent arena so that we can understand what is being achieved.
Yeah, so I think it's about 90%. There is actually, 10% or so of the medicine that's out there where the number one factor the data says is the experience of the medical team. And it's very difficult to go to someone who's done 3 of something and compare it to somebody who does 50 a year, because there is, I think, and again, I think it's about 10% of the procedures and kind of difficult to diagnose situations where, look, if it was your family member, you'd say, go to someone with some experience in this, right?
But we say that in part. We also say new doctors who are learning make more mistakes than older doctors. We don't say that about pilots. I mean, the question is, how are we training people so that by the time you're actually doing something, your error rate is the same, because we've created a system around you which enhances the experience. And I think we have volume outcome relationships all over the place in variability in performance, but it's in part because we tolerate it, as opposed to saying that needs to be something we need to address.
We're in the middle of a giant revolution, and we seem to, we got to be careful that we don't talk about Aristotelian medicine while we're dramatically changing the way. 80% of care happens out of hospitals in offices with less than 10 doctors. 80% of that is fundamentally consultative, answering questions about things. It's not procedural. Procedures are important, not saying they aren't, they are, right? And getting them right and understanding who does a better job and getting all that better, that all makes a lot of sense. But medicine's going to change like the travel industry changed. Who went to a travel agent lately, right? The revolution here isn't big data. The revolution is what I call big SOMO cloud, big social mobile cloud. People have computers on their hips. People have social media. People aren't going to be going to doctors to ask questions in 10 or 20 years. They're going to be going to their to a new form of delivery that doesn't involve single doctors. And this is the big data revolution, right? Of course, procedure will be done by people who are trained to do a good job of doing that. People who are good at doing knee surgery will do knee surgery.